Hello, fellow curriculum workers. Welcome to our presentation. The title of our presentation is Perennialism, the Philosophy of the Everlasting. We have put this together for you, Yolanda Babb, Brittany Barnes, Ginger Dupree, and me, Samantha Schuler. We've chosen the statue of the thinker because perennialism, as you will see, is all about creating thinkers. In our introduction to perennialism, we've created a definition that will help you differentiate from the other philosophies. This philosophy is an unbending educational philosophy. Its proponents see it as building knowledge to prepare for life. Perennial instruction encourages students to be rational thinkers and does not consider its needs or interests, but rather focuses curriculum on the classics and traditional ideas. Perennialists believe that since we all have the same essential nature, our education curriculum is universal. Educators who are influenced by perennialist thought will tend toward methods that teach concepts rather than specific information. And in slide 3, we talk about the key ideas of perennialism. This is just an overview of what you're going to learn about perennialism in this presentation. Ginger is going to talk to you about the history and proponents of perennialism, while Brittany discusses modern-day perennialism, and all of us will tell you a little bit about how it affects our own classrooms, and Yolanda will finish the presentation with her thoughts on modern-day thinkers.
By studying the great ideas of the past, we can better cope with the present and future. The irony of this cartoon is that the great thinkers did not need to be licensed educators to educate minds.
Perennialism dates back to some of the early philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle and up to Thomas Aquinas. We think about the concrete and we think about the abstract. We think. Over time, reasoning or thinking through questioning evolved into a disciplined study of ideas about knowledge. This disciplined study became the early stages of perennialism. Plato opened a school called the Academy where reasoning was practiced. His student Aristotle continued that idea of reasoning and applied it to studying concrete objects, which becomes science. Thomas Aquinas eventually is able to take the discipline of reasoning and couple it with his faith in order to validate his beliefs. Thomas Aquinas' philosophy of perennialism becomes the foundation for the early American colonial schools. It's here students studied Latin and Greek in order to read the older works. They were involved in rhetoric and logic to develop their reasoning. Up until the 1900s, American schools ran in this way. And then men like Robert Hutchins introduced a modern perennialistic philosophy, which shifted American education. So the purpose of education was to develop faith through reason up into the 1900s in American schools. It shifted to developing knowledge through reason. The takeaway for this is that education was no longer about knowing God relationally and rationally. It became about developing the intellect.
As Yolanda said, by studying the great ideas of the past, we can better cope with the present and the future. Perennialists believe that teachers are the authority and that readers are leaders. The idea is that the reader becomes the person that they're reading about or the book that they're reading from through the great books. The great books sharpen the minds and instill discipline. And the overall goal of perennialism is to develop the rational person and uncover universal truths by developing students' intellect and moral character. Perennialism today can be seen from many perspectives. It can be seen from the rigor of Common Core, the Socratic method from Socrates, and critical thinking from Bloom's taxonomy.
One of the responsibilities of leaders in education is to shape the minds of our students. The instructional practices of perennialism has shifted from being seen as authoritative in Ornstein and Huckins to leadership skill development. Within my own school, with my first grade level team, we all design our lesson plans to increase their thinking skills by using the Bloom's taxonomy thinking stems. For example, when teaching about the characteristics of 2D and 3D shapes, the first thing that we will think about is identifying the names of these shapes through a flashcard game where students can easily identify it. The next thing that students will do is to make connections with shapes within the real world. Then students will be asked to compare and contrast between shapes, such as what 3D shape does a square look like, and why do you think that? Finally, the students are asked to design and apply their skills. In this picture, students use recycled items to create a 2D, 3D shaped neighborhood city. As a graduate student, perennialism plays a major part in my studies. Through reading the ideologies of great philosophers in education, I can enable myself to analyze my own teaching practices.
Let me tell you about my little first grade thinkers in Ms. Schuler's classroom. In elementary school, perennialism has multiple uses. According to Ornstein and Hunkins, at the elementary school level, the curriculum stressed the 3 R's as well as moral and religious training. This is still true today, except maybe the religious part, since we're not really allowed to do that anymore. But we do stress character education and discuss morals and values. We also look at changes over time and talk about what has happened in the past and how that is important and how it affects us today. There's a big focus in first grade on reading skills. We believe that students who struggle with reading after they leave first grade will probably continue to struggle throughout their school career. So that is a very important aspect of what we do. But what I want to draw your attention to in my classroom is our use of thinking maps. Thinking maps are graphic organizers that help students learn thinking skills. I've included a picture of one. This is a brace. This is a brace map that compares number words to the actual numerals. And this helps students to be able to see how they are the same. Perennialism is an important piece of my overall philosophy of education. I do believe that it's important to teach students to be productive, moral members of their community. They should be educated to be able to think and make choices that will benefit our society. As a graduate student, the content that I am learning at this time will help me to prepare to critically consider various curriculums so that I can determine what curricula is best for my school or my school system.
On Barnes Boulevard in my 6th grade class, we approach perennialism through rigor, through Common Core, and SchoolNet. Ornstein and Hunkins classify perennialists as those who emphasize testing and tougher academic standards. We definitely do that in my 6th grade ELA class, as SchoolNet is a major tool that I use. Now, SchoolNet evaluates students and disaggregates the data, but it's all based on Common Core, which we know is there to increase rigor. So when I use SchoolNet, I embody my inner perennialist because I emphasize the importance of testing and challenge my students through the rigor of the Common Core standards. Even now, perennialism contributes to my learning because I'm instructed to read and research theories of old to shape my own perspectives right now. This very course affirms perennialism because we study the fundamentals of curriculum. Ornstein and Hunkins state, together, the fundamental subjects and intellectual skills lead to a higher level of learning, reflection, and awareness.
A perennialist says century-old ideas matter and that they are best learned by reading and analyzing the work of those before us. It's easy to apply a perennialist strategy in a science classroom when we read, analyze, and experiment with the achievements of history scientists. For example, in 7th grade science, we teach a cell unit. This is an opportunity to consider the reasoning of men like Francesco Redi. In Redi's lifetime, people believed in spontaneous generation, which was a theory that said non-living things can produce life. Francesco Redi didn't believe this. He believed life came from life, which was an old idea. He set up a controlled scientific experiment to logically disprove spontaneous generation. With this, he was able to validate life could not come from non-living matter. Perennialism is not a means to educate the masses through teacher-controlled curriculum and rigorous testing as practiced by some today. Rather, true perennialism is critical thinking using logical reasoning. This is invaluable to me in student mentoring, lesson planning, teacher collaboration, as well as being an influence outside the classroom.
We chose the thinker to symbolize perennialism because it represents the solid foundation of this philosophy. We are encouraged to have our students continuously question different concepts to enable them to form their own ideology. The term readers are leaders reinforces the ideas of great philosophers. Through perennialism, we are able to mold our students to become active critical thinkers and also leaders of their generation. Consequences of not passing the baton will cause us to live in a broken society. This will cause chaos within our own nation, full of empty minds.
And finally, let's look at the graduate standards that we have addressed in this presentation. We've covered 2. The first is Standard 3, content and curriculum expertise. As curriculum workers, it is important for us to be able to choose appropriate curriculum. As we understand the different philosophies, we are more able to consider the purposes and visions of our individual school to choose what curriculum is right for us. The second standard that we covered is student learning. Also, as curriculum leaders, we must determine our own beliefs about student learning, and we must open our minds as we explore major philosophies so that we can broaden and explore the best methods and practices for our students. If you're interested in more information on perennialism, please explore our references pages that follow this. And we hope that you have enjoyed our presentation and that you've learned something from us. Thank you.